Look at that sky.
It has just gotten so light so quickly. I've heard barred owls out here when we've been netting for bats, and they have a very distinct call, and you can usually call them in, like, ooh, 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 and you can call them and they'll respond.
We have lost 99% of grasslands across the southeastern United States. Just imagine Great Smoky Mountains National Park had been cut. It'd be devastating. Part of the reason why that doesn't resonate with most people is these grasslands were gone before the camera was invented, and they've been erased from society's collective memory. The general paradigm is that this land was once covered in forests. The more I dug, we realized that none of that matched reality. I'm Dwayne Estes. I'm a co-founder and executive director of the Southeastern Grasslands Institute at Austin Peay State University. The loss of more than 90 to 99% of grasslands has resulted in just tragic collapses of plants and animals, what we consider to be the greatest threat facing the biodiversity of Eastern North America. Our organization is solving that problem through a mix of science-based and history-based approaches.
So you talked about 99.99% of the prairie is gone.
Yeah.
What caused that?
You know, it varies by region, but specifically for this prairie, the vast majority of that was converted to row crop agriculture. It happened over 2 centuries. In about the 1990s, everybody started getting these fancy mowers, and all these golden grasses became a thing of the past. When we started this work, a lot of people were attempting to restore grasslands with mixes of 4 or 5 species. And the reality is they were not achieving the type of conservation results they thought they should get. So we looked outside the Southeast, like the Chicago region, where they're using species mixes of 150 species to restore ecosystems. And that is really transformative. That's the approach we're using at Google. Restoring grasslands is deeply personal for me. In the fall of 2014, I was just having a hard time. We had just had a baby boy in September who had to have open heart surgery. And it was just the type of year where you just want the winter to go away. Early March, the sun was shining for the first time in what seemed a month. And I said, we need to go on a hike and experience nature. So I told my wife, I said, y'all, let's hop in the car, and 45 minutes later, immediately upon stepping into that prairie, just the warmth, the radiance of the sun, it was nourishing and nurturing. And so my little kids just started playing like bunny rabbits in the grass. And I was so moved by that experience. But then I was also disappointed that I had to drive my family an hour to experience that. So I immediately said, you know what, girls, Daddy's gonna build you prairies back home in our town. And my wife's like, how are you gonna do that? This was our very first site. We had a private donation from a company called Roundstone Native Seed. They said, you know what, if you can find 15 acres of land, we'll give you a donation of all the seeds and all the other materials you need. We'll even come and plant it. Long before Google actually came to town, I wanted to restore prairies on that property. And it had been farmed for, decades. We were just literally in our first months of growing SGI. And I went over to this property to sit with my laptop. That was all soybean fields. And I was just sitting there writing a proposal for some grant. And it was like 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night. I got a phone call. Hey, this is Google. I said, wait a minute, this is Google? I said, you will never guess this, but I'm actually sitting in front of what will become Google's property. And she said, well, I have just gotten word from your university president of your initiative, and we would love to invite you guys to submit a proposal. It couldn't have been more coincidental. And in 2020, we planted the prairie at Google. And so, our first site was 15 acres. Our second site at Google was 50 acres. That's about to expand to 105 acres. Google is now in our community the most diverse prairie that's ever been planted, possibly in the Southeast. Now that just shines a light on the potential for other corporations to do the same. So you start adding this 25,000 acres, 105 acres here, the 5 acres we just bought, and all of a sudden you have this archipelago of prairie. So then you have species that are flying overhead, they will have places to land and go back to. And just in the 3 years this project's been going, we're seeing the evidence of those wildlife species come back to the site. Grasshopper sparrows, bald eagles, northern harrier hawks, otters, and it's just invigorating. The most frequently asked question that we get is, why are grasslands important to humans? There are obviously many reasons why, but as a biologist, I want to say, well, they're important because the species need to live just like we do. The Google Prairie is such a unique place for our entire community, and that's part of why we created the Southeastern Grasslands Institute, but also it's to connect these landscapes to people in more meaningful ways. That it's almost like this outdoor community building experience, but also doing a lot of good for conservation.